All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick, recording on a Monday afternoon. Today we're going to talk about the Packers and the Seahawks in the aftermath of Sunday Night Football. We'll talk about a reshaped Coach of the Year market now that Dan Campbell has taken a tumble, and we will talk about the NBA Most Improved Player market now that our dearly beloved Franz Wagner sleeps with the fishes for the intents and purposes of that market, sadly. But let's start off with the Green Bay Packers, Drew, who closed 2.5 to 3 point favorites in Seattle. They destroyed the Seahawks even before Geno's injury. They were well on their way to blowing Seattle out. Does last night reorient how you think, particularly about the Packers defense?
Definitely. And most of my takeaways were the defense. The offense kind of hit their highs. They got out to a nice lead, and they were able to, make the best out of a very positive game state. But the defense, to me, being a little shorthanded, no Jair Alexander, missing some safety depth, and really not having a ton of sustained success from the pass rush standpoint all season. It was stand up and take notice as to how important the pass rush was able to get home against the Seahawks offensive line that, with the return of Abe Lucas, has been playing better. And Geno Smith, certainly a veteran quarterback who can evade pressure. It was like when they needed it, they turned it up and they delivered pass rush yesterday. And I would say that in general, that changes sort of the scope of them being able to contribute to a surprise run in the playoffs, because they're going to almost certainly have to do it on the road. Their chances of winning the NFC North are pretty much zilch. And I would expect that, they're going to match up against some pretty beatable teams, I think, in the NFC playoff picture. And if the defense shows up like they did on the road and really can create some pressure on their opposing quarterbacks, a lot of the quarterbacks in the mix right now in the NFC are quarterbacks that are susceptible to pressure. And that's really the way you unwind some of these offenses. So, I think that was sort of the key obvious takeaway about the defense. And, as you look at how they're performing over the balance of the season, they are certainly a top half right now. I was unwilling to go any higher than about 16th heading into this most recent game. And now with my upgrades, I'm closer to 11th. And the only number I moved was the pass rush. I'm expecting the coverage will go up to once we see Alexander back.
Yes, that will be key. I mean, Alexander, you almost have to bake him missing a lot of times. That's what he kind of does. But with him back, the cornerback core looks a lot better. On the Seahawks side, very disappointing game from Seattle. Even before the Geno injury, I was expecting a lot more out of them than what they gave. How do you feel about the Seattle defense, and how much do you downgrade them after the Packers, largely moved the ball at will in the competitive portion of the game?
Well, this was sort of the bellwether test. We were going to learn whether they were for real deal top five or whether it was positive matchups and a little bit of smoke and mirrors that was getting them to look good on paper. And I think we learned it is the latter. Certainly, the coverage was pretty suspect. Inability to really generate the key stops on important downs was pretty obvious. And the hallmark Mike McDonald misdirection, disguise, confusion, like none of it really felt there. And I don't know if that was 100% because of the game state they were in, where they were on their heels and pretty quickly in that one. But it did not feel like this was the type of game you build with if you're trying to get this unit ready for a playoff push. So I had them as a top 7 defense heading into last week, and I think I'm going to knock down a number of their ratings here. In particular, the coverage I think is not as good as I was expecting, and just in general, this is a coverage unit that is dealing with some injuries, and I think this is probably a defense that is just outside the top 10.
Yeah, and in terms of the division, the repercussions for the NFC West in the market now, the Rams -155, the Seahawks +200, the Cardinals 7-1. The San Francisco 49ers, heavy favorites before the season. They are done in that department. By my numbers, I make the Rams minus 161, fair, so not really any meat on the bone there. I make the Seahawks plus 257, and that's banking in that Geno will miss 1 week, which is, again, just a calculated guess at this point. And then the Cardinals plus 876. Do you think there is a bet to be made in and around this division, be it on the division prices or any of the longer-term futures?
Well, I thought there was going to be some value in the Cardinals, but I really can't get there number wise, so probably going to be passing. I think the injury to Geno Smith obviously materially changes things, because as it stands right now, the Rams control their destiny. Nothing, which makes the Jets game funny, right? The Rams could lose that game by 100. They could win by 100. And it doesn't really change their material outcome because they need to win their final 2 against Arizona and Seattle. And then the division is theirs. I think that in general, the Seattle game, I was looking at more of like a coin flip when we were pricing it last week. Now I would say it's pretty clear they're going to be at 3, if not a little above. Again, kind of depending on the long-term health of Geno Smith. And then the game against the Cardinals is probably the more interesting one. We're going to get some look-ahead numbers that I think have some, give us a little bit of insight here as we get into this week. But yeah, that game, I was expecting it to be in and around like a -6, but I think ultimately it's probably going to be closer to 3.5.
Yeah, I think this Rams-Jets game is now about, in terms of at least the division scenarios for the Rams, it's about a 15% swing based on whether they win or lose, which is material, but in a race this competitive and with such little time left, that's perhaps not as big of a swing as you would expect from a game that is, the Rams are 3.5 point favorites, so it's lined like a fairly close matchup. But the fact is that if they sweep the Cardinals and Seahawks, both home games, then they will win the division. They are 100% to win the division if they win those 2 games, no matter what else happens. What the Jets game will do is give them a little bit of insurance in case they do win that. Then they could afford a slip up if results go their way, but it takes it out of their hands. So do you think that the Rams right now are the clear best team in that division? Or ironically, the Niners might still be the best team in the division, right?
Yeah, let me take a look at my numbers. That's a very fair question. I have the Rams. I rate the Rams barely better than the Niners. And I have both the Rams and the Niners better than Seattle. And I have all 3 teams better than the Cardinals. But the difference here, we're talking about the 14th best team to the 19th best team. So it's all very, very tight cluster as far as how I see them overall. And, with the Rams, it's all just the defense dragging them down as far as the rating goes. This offense is pretty obviously top 10, I think. And if their defense plays a little bit better coming down the home stretch, then, I think there's scope for the Rams to get to as good as maybe about a +2.5, +3 rating. But, as they exist right now, I think they're kind of in the 1.5 range.
Yeah. It's funny, for everything that has transpired in the past 12 months, there is a good chance that we wind up with the Lions hosting the Rams again in a playoff game where the line, at this point, it might be like 3.5 again or whatever it was last year with how insanely banged up the Lions are at the moment. I think in terms of just general interest, betting aside, I think it's the most compelling if the Rams do get in, just because of their upside and their offense and the fact that, Matthew Stafford just went head-to-head with Josh Allen and put up higher EPA per play and beat Josh Allen. And just the level that Rams offense can get to, combined with the fact that their defense isn't very good, but at least it's not very good in a way that has pathways to high variance performances, just because the pass rush is good, and the fact that Verse and these guys can go off, even if the back end, the less said about it, the better. So I think the Rams, if the Rams are the 4 seed or even the 3 seed, if they get in, then I don't know, I won't feel like they're drawing dead at all against any team because of the upside that offense has shown, whereas it doesn't feel like the Cardinals or the Seahawks really have the ceiling to win 3 playoff games and get to the Super Bowl, barring an uncanny string of events. All right.
I agree. It's worth noting that the most likely 3-6 is probably going to be Rams Packers. Like in another universe, that's an NFC Championship game.
Right. And that'll probably, I mean, with the way that the market respects the Packers, that'll be lined pretty close to pick, I would think, even if it is in Los Angeles. All right,
Agreed.
Today is the first day of BetMGM's 7 days of parlays. On Tuesday, account holders will receive an Any Sport Parlay Boost token, score a bigger payout if your wager with the Parlay Boost token hits. Token can be used on parlays and same-game parlays. All right, NFL Coach of the Year. We were talking about this before we know the outcome of Bears-Vikings, so bear that in mind. I think for the most part, we'll just assume that the minus 340 favored Vikings win. And Kevin O'Connell moves to 12-2. If he doesn't, then it'll be chaotic. But right now he is, as we're recording on Monday afternoon, he is a plus 150 favorite. Dan Campbell plus 250. Sean Payton is 4-1. Dan Quinn plus 750. Mike Tomlin 12-1. Then Andy Reid is 18-1. And there ends, I think, the list of candidates who are greater than even 1% to win the award. I think Jim Harbaugh is done after the loss on Sunday. Matt LaFleur, just it's too difficult without the division for him, and the fact that he's already banked 4 losses. I don't see it with Sean McDermott at all. So do you think there is a bet to be made in this market?
There is, and I'm assuming that it is you said it. We don't know what happens in Monday Night Football, but I think it's fair to assume that the Vikings take care of business there. And I think the Vikings are an interesting case because they are likely to storm the NFC North with a victory against the absolutely, beleaguered defense that the Lions is running out there right now. Like, there is a much greater probability than I think people have wrapped their heads around that there could be a 2-game skid here with the Lions losing to the Niners and the Vikings, considering what's happened to their depth. And if that happens, then the whole standings look very different. You're looking at a 1-seed Philly team, a 2-seed Minnesota team, and people are absolutely going to be doing a good amount of patting on the back of KOC for what he's done, particularly considering that this is a very, very impressive job by him specifically, of kind of coaching up Sam Darnold, and it's at this point at least feels less like you're going to have to give lots and lots of credit to Flores, even though the defensive side of the ball for the Vikings is sort of the clear and obvious standout unit. Kevin O'Connell at plus anything to me looks like a bet. I think that, I'm disappointed that Dan Quinn is not getting more coverage and more flattery here. I think the job he has done has been sort of the more classical and quintessential Coach of the Year case, where it's just like, where did this come from? How did this happen? But as we look at the matchup with the Eagles and the market, just kind of telling us, pretty clearly it's going to take, a very surprising effort to get any kind of footing back in the NFC East. So Commies probably lose this week to the Eagles. Division's over, and then Quinn just becomes kind of a down ballot candidate, I think, and Kevin O'Connell is your likely winner.
Yeah, so I think the most interesting question upon which this market hinges is what if the Commanders beat the Eagles? Which I know everyone just kind of bakes into like, the Commanders won't beat the Eagles. The Commanders are plus 138 to beat the Eagles. Like, it's their 3.5-point dogs. The 3.5 is getting back, so it might close a field goal. The Commanders' offense is very, very good. The Eagles are a little bit banged up, and also Jalen Hurts, I do not trust to automatically just win every game the rest of the way. So I think that, look, the market is saying that there is about a 40% chance that the Commanders beat the Eagles. And then with a lot of these awards, the key is just ask yourself how something's going to feel if a result happens. How is it going to feel if Dan Quinn beats the Eagles, who have won 1 million games in a row and are riding high? Like, how is it going to feel if that 40% gets up? Yeah, if the 60% gets up, he's probably cooked because of the field. But if the 40% gets up, then all of a sudden this market is in chaos again. So I think that is the most interesting single game result that can affect this market. And most people would point to week 18, O'Connell versus Dan Campbell. But my hot take there would be that I don't really think Dan Campbell's a candidate for this award anymore.
No, I don't
and I think he is taking up an insane amount of book at the moment and I get that he's got all the injury narrative and stuff, and that cushions him a little bit. But at the same time, like, this team was Super Bowl favorite a week ago, and they won the division last year. They were expected to be really good. I think he had to go 16-1, or he had to go 15-2 and not kick an onside kick with 12 minutes left against the Bills, which I think the people now are going to point to that to undermine his aggressiveness, which I think is a fair criticism. That I don't think Dan Campbell is particularly analytically minded. I just think he hits the aggressive button every single time. It's not analytics if you do the same thing every single time, regardless of the context. We learned everything we needed to know about Dan Campbell when he went for 2 on 4th and 7 against the Cowboys at the end of last season, which was a purely insane decision to do that, given that there were like 19 seconds left in the game and you're going to go to overtime. Instead of a coin flip in overtime, you're going to convert 4th and 7 with Jared Goff for the season. So I think that Campbell is gobbling up far too much of this book. I'm with you on Kevin O'Connell. Now, if he loses to Caleb Williams, we'll obviously reassess. But right now, I think that if Kevin O'Connell, if he beats Chicago, then I would take him over the field in this market. I just think that sometimes you just have to zoom out. And the fact that Kevin O'Connell there's 3 weeks left in the season, Drew. Kevin O'Connell right now has 2 losses with Sam Darnold. Yeah. Like, it's completely insane that this is happening. And also, he just ticks every box. The team has improved. They won 7 games last year. They are, as we speak, heavy favorites to go 13 plus. That's a massive improvement. Their win total was 6.5, 7 flat. They're going to vastly exceed that. And then also, I think that with Coach of the Year, a trap that people sometimes fall into too much is they focus too much on team record or simply the improvement, and not as much on the fact that, like, these voters, they watch the game, and you need to be able to pinpoint the actual coaching. And that's always been the issue with Quinn, is that, like, he's a defensive head coach, and this team is special because of Jaden Daniels. With Kevin O'Connell, he is the quarterback whisperer. Guess who he's whispering to? Sam Darnold. He's turned around this guy's career. I just think it's such an ironclad case, particularly, like, I right now make him going 14-3 or better shorter than his Coach of the Year price. Which I think is just like, if he goes 14-3, I think that's just good night to the field, whatever happens pretty much. If Quinn ran the slate, it might get a little bit interesting, but even then, I think O'Connell would probably beat him at 14-3. And I think O'Connell's live at 13-4 as well. So, I think that if O'Connell has beaten the Bears by the time you're listening to this, I think he should probably be odds on.
13-4 means you're losing, though, to the Packers and the Lions, probably, right?
Well, I mean, it depends. You could lose to the Seahawks as well. As part of that, could have lost to the Bears as well, and then surge home. I think
if it's the Packers and Lions, though, you're in trouble.
If you lose those two back to back, but again, like, momentum in this award, I think, is a little bit overrated. Like, Brian Daboll won like 2 games in the second half of the season and won the award. Kevin Stefanski, the first year that he won with the Browns, they faltered down the stretch as well. I think that people kind of overrate late season momentum in these awards a little bit too much. And I think that voters, for the most part, they do a pretty good job of stepping back and looking holistically at the season. I think that's why Mike Trout beat Alex Bregman in what I think it was 2019 or maybe 2018, when Mike Trout missed the entire final month of the season and still won the MVP. I think it's why Luis Hill won AL Rookie of the Year despite getting lit up by the Athletics and the Pirates his final 2 starts, because people are able to step back and look at the season in its totality. And I just don't think that if Kevin O'Connell, here's the thing, if there are stakes in that final Lions game, I think that's only good for O'Connell, because it'll mean that he is in position to potentially win the division. And then if there are no stakes in that game, then he's probably going to win that game. So because it's more likely, I think that the Lions will have be in position for the 1 seed there because they've got this game coming up against Chicago, which should be a win for them. So overall, I think that how you slice it up, and again, like this is about competing cases. Like you need to price out, 1, what is the likelihood that a coach gets to a certain win record, and then 2, how would you price his like head-to-head matchup against another coach at another record? So like Kevin O'Connell 14-3 versus Dan Quinn 12-5. I think that's close. I think O'Connell wins. O'Connell 13-4 against Mike Tomlin 12-5 division winner. I actually think Kevin O'Connell would win there if he's gotten a better record than Mike Tomlin with that Steelers defense. So again, these are subjective takes, but my sense is that, again, based on how O'Connell polled as well at mid-season, where I think he overperformed relative to expectations. I just think there are a lot of things pointing in KOC's direction.
Okay, well, I'm going to live in the. I think those are the we've kind of killed the handicap here in a lot of ways. In general, Dan Quinn is I want to live in the 40% world where he beats the Eagles, because like that does feel like sort of okay, this is now decided. It's Dan Quinn. We can move on. Like there would be a little bit of like, okay, whatever happens last 2 weeks of the season doesn't really matter, because I guess the worst outcome for me by far in this market would be that if there's just sort of a round robin of teams beating each other here and everybody's just kind of like, I don't really like any of their cases. Look what Sean Payton did with Bo Nix. Like if that is the narrative that ultimately wins out here, I'm going to be pretty bent.
Yeah, well, I think Payton can win, but I think that the thing is with a lot of these cases is that a lot of them are bubbles that are floating through the air and they deflate with a single loss. I think Payton is one of these bubble operators where if he takes a loss, then all of a sudden he's an 11-6 wild card with an awesome defense that he's not really responsible for. And at that point, still be a fine case, might finish 3rd, but I don't think that'll stack up against KOC or Quinn or Tomlin winning the division. And the thing about the Broncos is, like, I make them almost 11-1 to run the slate. And I don't and if Payton runs the slate to get to 12-5 as a wild card, I don't think he's like automatic win there either. Like, I think that'd lose to Quinn with the same record, and Quinn is almost twice as likely to run the slate because of the schedule and the fact that he's got this layup game against the Cowboys. Relative layup. They lost to the Cowboys last time. But I think that it is very difficult to construct a path for Payton to actually win the award. I think he has to run the slate, and then I think he needs help with O'Connell and Quinn taking losses. So for me, just like no interest whatsoever at price. And I think that the big takeaway here is that right now, Kevin O'Connell and Dan Quinn are taking up about 50% of the equity in the market. And I think it should be more like 80%. So I would just back both of those guys at plus 150 and plus 750. And then, hope that Joe Burrow kills off Sean Payton in a week and a half. And then that the read is right. You're reading it right on Dan Campbell, or we're reading it right on Dan Campbell, and that Tomlin takes one more loss as well, which I think would probably knock him out relative to KOC and Quinn.
Yeah. Tomlin's taken a couple more losses, and they're going to be high profile because they're going to be on standalone games. So
you might get Carson Wentz, which could help him. Let me tell you again, this is another thing. Like, how's it going to feel? Like, we all think that the Ravens are going to truck the Steelers on Saturday. The Steelers are plus 225. So like a 30% chance or whatever to win that game. How's it going to feel if that 30% gets up and then they get Carson Wentz on Christmas? Like, and then all of a sudden the Steelers, they're 12-4 if they do that double. And then at that point, the division is clinched. And probably week 18 is meaningless. Like, Tomlin is the guy, like, people will want to vote for Mike Tomlin, but I think to have any chance, he needs to sweep these next 2 games. Otherwise, it's probably going to be too dicey against this caliber of field and the candidates that KOC and Quinn are likely to be. But certainly not writing off Mike Tomlin. with a lot of these awards and these candidates, you've always just got to like ask yourself, like, who do people want to vote for? Like, who actually has momentum that goes beyond just what their case looks like on paper? People love to vote for Mike Tomlin, Coach of the Year, if he has the case. I don't think he's going to have it in terms of what he needs to do in terms of wins. But if he sweeps these next 2 games, he will have a very, very strong case. It's just that, he's not as likely to get to 13-4 as Kevin O'Connell is. So that's why I think O'Connell is the guy in this market. All right, ring in the holiday season with a double dip of NFL football on NBC and Peacock this weekend. It all kicks off Saturday at noon Eastern as we lead you up to kickoff between the Texans and Chiefs. Then on Sunday night, Baker Mayfield and the Bucs travel to Dallas for a date with the Cowboys.
As you all know by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up to BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE, and you'll get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code BETEDGE. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your first bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code BETEDGE when you sign up. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only, subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE and get your $1,500 first bet offer today.
Okay, let's close out with NBA Most Improved Player with Franz Wagner, who I try and reprice this market for myself every week or so. And the day Franz got hurt was I think the day or the time that around the time I'd flipped Franz into being favorite against the field, where I would have just about taken him. Well, I would have taken him over the field by himself, and then he goes down and throws this market into chaos where there is now a vacuum. The guy who has stepped up into that vacuum most of all recently is Tyler Herro, who is the favorite at BetMGM plus 275. Joint favorite, with Jalen Williams, who's plus 275. A couple of Hawks, Jalen Johnson and Dyson Daniels are the next 2 up at 6-1. Then you have RJ Barrett, Evan Mobley, Norm Powell, 18-1. Cade Cunningham, Jalen Suggs, 25-1. Do you think there is a bet to be made at price?
Well, hopefully you got your hero number in at a much bigger number than plus 275. I don't take exception with him being at the top of this board here. He is at this point, I think, likely to get consideration, if not just outright be included in the All-Star field for the East, which is weak right now. And this award, I think, still does kind of echo most coherently with first-time All-Star. Jalen Williams being in the conversation because he's also a likely first-time All-Star makes sense. And I think those, that this is a 2-man race right now. I mean, I the only knock I have on Herro is I think he's not even the most improved player on the Heat. I think that's pretty obviously Nikola Jovic. And I think Herro is he's taken a material step forward. The counting stats all look good. And certainly the Heat are cruising up the standings again in a very weak East. So it makes the top of the board makes sense to me. And I think as I look down the board for a long shot, I really just can't make a strong case for any of these guys. I particularly respect what we're seeing from Cade Cunningham. I particularly respect what we're seeing from Dyson Daniels. I don't think either of those guys is realistically going to get considered for an All-Star spot. I think the LaMelo Ball case is extremely weak. I think the RJ Barrett case is weak. The Jalen Johnson case is weak, in my opinion. I think you'd probably be shopping in the 100 to 1-ish range if you wanted to get weird, and maybe even give some consideration to a player like Benedict Mathurin, who again I've had as a enormous negative coming into this season, has proven himself to be an average player. So that's a big improvement, I guess. No, this is a tough market to price right now because there was such a clear runaway with Franz until he got hurt, and now it is truly chaos. And if you say I can only have one, I'm taking Jalen Williams because I think the Thunder are going to have a lot of representation in the All-Star game.
Yeah, I wouldn't quite agree that Jovic is more improved than Herro. I think I like Jovic. I enjoy his game. Big fan of the way he plays. He's still averaging 8 points a game, and I get that he's taken on a bigger role. But I think with Herro, the thing is with him is that there is, and it's kind of like the Coach of the Year thing of being able to point to the coaching. Like it's kind of like with when Brandon Ingram won Most Improved Player, there was very specific things that you could point to that he improved. Like he started launching threes and making them at a really good rate and getting to the line more and just improved his shooting. With Herro, he has changed the way he plays offense entirely. He just decided to completely bin mid-range jump shots. And as a result, he's gotten significantly more efficient. I think having watched a strange amount of Heat basketball this year, I think he's gotten significantly better as a passer and a playmaker. And that doesn't show up so much in the assist numbers yet, though there has been a bump there. But it just seems like it is kind of his offense. And I think that this award is largely about paradigm shifts in your perception. And that has been, I think, the issue with Jalen Williams from the start is that, okay, so he was the distant second best player on the Thunder. His paradigm shift is going to be in year 3, remaining the distant second best player on the Thunder. And you could argue that he's the third best player on the Thunder with how Chet Holmgren was playing and how Chet was probably going to roll to Defensive Player of the Year. But with Herro, the fact that he has gone from, he was considered in the same breath as guys like Jordan Poole and like a much worse version of Tyrese Maxey, of these like offense-only guards who aren't really point guards and they jack up shots and don't really play defense. And his contract was considered poison. He is the distant third best player on the Heat. And now, look, I don't think he's better at basketball than Jimmy Butler, but I think a lot of people are going to think that, if he is the Heat's all-star candidate, that Tyler Herro has gone from the third best player on the Heat to the best player on the Heat in the regular season, at least. And that is the type of paradigm shift that wins this award. The issue with Herro and what makes him, I don't think, a slam dunk candidate is that the counting stat increase just isn't massive. Like he's gone from 20.8 points per game to 24.2. He's gone from 4.5 assists to 5 assists. His case is mostly that his efficiency has just gone through the absolute roof, where he's gone from 55.8% true shooting to 63.9. And I think that is going to regress a little bit. But with the shot profile being so much different and so much more efficient in general, I do think that he is, a heavy, heavy favorite to have by far the best efficiency of his career. And right now, the counting stat increase, I think, is enough to make him the best candidate in a weak field. But I think it limits his ceiling somewhat that, we normally see guys who win this award making 5, 6, 7 point increases in points per game. And Herro right now is plus 3.4 over what he was last year. And so it's a bit more of a niche case than usually wins, but I think it is the cleanest overall profile at the moment. And also, like, as you mentioned, his biggest competition right now is Jalen Williams, who has gone from averaging 19.1 points per game last season, and now he's averaging 21.7. So he has taken an even smaller leap than Herro, and his efficiency has gone backwards with the increased role, with Chet out, with just naturally taking on a bit more responsibility in that offense. So I think Herro wins that head-to-head for now. How important do you think it is that Herro is doing this in year 6, and it's kind of out of nowhere, versus Jalen Williams, and even, like, to a lesser extent, Jalen Johnson? The fact that, like, Jalen Williams is doing exactly what I thought he would do this year, right? Like, this is fairly linear improvement for a guy in year 3 compared to
no question. It's a very fair point. The unexpected career jump to a 24 point per game player, if he can sustain that, which I take no exception to, is notable. That part of the calculus is tough to come up with a fair on, but I think that certainly the fact that Herro was a little bit of a distressed commodity and now is potentially an all-star is that's a fun story to tell.
Indeed. These Hawks guys, Dyson Daniels is not the type of case that typically wins. I think it would take a huge groundswell behind a guy who's averaging 13 points a game. And also it's just weird because the Hawks have 3 most improved player candidates. When you think about DeAndre Hunter is also playing the best ball of his career by far. And I'm not sure if they kind of they dilute each other a little bit, and they all have their own strengths and weaknesses in their cases naturally. But Daniels, I think, would probably have to up the scoring and just up his profile in general to win for a guy averaging sub 15 points per game. Jalen Johnson, who on paper, again, like he has solid stat increases. He's gone from 16 a game to 19 and a half. His playmaking has increased. But the thing with Johnson and the red flag is that his stat increase and his usage increase basically all came when DeAndre Hunter was out. And last year, Jalen Johnson was 19% usage. This year, when Hunter plays, he's at 20% usage. Like, it's just not enough. Like, you can't win the award with a 1% usage bump. So I think Jalen Johnson, to actually win, he will need an injury or something to change in that Hawks ecosystem to give him more usage than he's getting at the moment. Like, every night, Jalen Johnson's being set in the market at like 18 and a half points. Like, he averaged 16 points a game last year. The Hawks, who are kind of frisky and fun now, which I think was the biggest thing working against him when, their win total was 33 and a half for a time. But I think that he needs to kind of bleed more usage out of the usage stone of the Hawks to actually win the award. So I think he's certainly one to monitor. But again, he also has the thing where, similar to Jalen Williams, where a lot of it is like linear improvement. Everyone picked Jalen Johnson to win most improved player before the season, which is probably a red flag for his most improved player case if everyone was expecting the type of leap that he has made. So I think that he is a solid candidate and he could win, but I don't really see it certainly at price at the moment. In the next tier, is there anyone out of Barrett, Mobley, Powell, Cunningham, Suggs that is interesting to you?
I mean, as far as a bet, no, I don't think so. I think their cases and their improvements are obvious, and in particular, I think Evan Mobley is weirdly going a little bit underappreciated for what his role has meant for the Cavs so far. But no, I'm not really enthusiastic about any of these players changing their usage or their role in the offense enough to give them a bigger step up in terms of just the raw counting stat improvement, which always comes as part of the equation here. So I think I think this probably comes down to the guys at the top. And again, like, I would give Jalen Williams, even you're right, like, it's not a great case. He hasn't taken as big a step forward, and it all feels very expected. But I am still seeing him as the most likely first-time All-Star out of these guys.
Yep. Of the kind of second tier of guys, like Norm Powell's shooting 48% from 3, and that's just going to cool off. And he's taking many more unassisted threes than last year. So he's taking harder shots and he's shooting way better on them. So that is just very likely going to regress. Mobley, to your point, doesn't really have the stat increase. RJ Barrett is on a disaster team, and I think will probably wither away. Cade, I think, is interesting, but he needs to juice the points per game because it's pretty much fairly flat with what he was doing last season. I think of this group, to me, the most interesting guy in this group would be Suggs, just because if Suggs was just shooting like he did last year, he would be probably the front runner for the award. Like, he's shooting 31% from 3, jacking 7 a game. If he was just making them at a half decent rate, he would have gone from like 12.5 points per game last year to 18 plus this year. And with just the usage vacuum that Franz is going to vacate for the next 6 weeks or so. And also Suggs quietly, even in like the 5 games or whatever that Paolo and Franz played together, Suggs was getting randomly huge usage in those games. So I think he is someone who has the upside. It's just that we're getting to the point now where like these guys have banked a lot of stats. Like Jalen Suggs has banked 27 games at like 53% true shooting. Like it's just not ideal last year he was at north of 60%. So I think he's interesting just because he is fairly high variance and he's taking a lot of shots and he has such a low baseline to improve from as well, 12.6 points. And he is a really good improvement story. But I think he'll actually, in a way, benefit from Paolo coming back because Suggs is shooting like 15% on pull-up threes and taking a lot of them. I think he just needs to stop doing that because they're not going in. Whereas he's shooting fine on catch and shoots, and that diet will increase when Paolo comes back and he doesn't have to do it all himself. But yeah, it's a bit weird, this market, the fact that like Tyler Herro and Jalen Williams are the 2 favorites and they're both fairly imperfect, but which would lead, you would think, to value being deeper on the board. But it's kind of hard to find inspiring cases amongst this group. So a market to monitor for now, but I do think that Tyler Herro is the most likely player for now to win the award.
Can I ask you one quick question? If there's like an improved team, and I'm just like really kind of reaching here, really reaching, the Rockets are sort of the obvious improved team. Is there a candidate on the Rockets?
I did the dance earlier in the season with Alperen Şengün and Jalen Green, and they both came up snake eyes. But no, like it just doesn't go to guys like, you know, Amen Thompson's in his 2nd year and is averaging 12 points a game. It's not going to go to Jabari. Like I just think it had to be Şengün or Green, and that team is just way too equal opportunity and spread out. And the fact that like I think that Green needed to be like a 26 27 point per game scorer, which it looked like he was potentially going to be in the first couple of weeks of the season, but he's averaging 19 points per game. He's just not going to sniff it. And then Şengün, who I thought was the best bet earlier on, he just hasn't made the counting stat increase. He's gone backwards. He averaged 21 a game last year. He is averaging 18.6 this year. So I don't think there's any real candidate from the Rockets. I don't think they have really any player awards candidate outside of Amen Thompson for 6th man of the year, who everyone's looking up at Peyton Pritchard in that market, but I would still have Amen as a top 3 favorite there. I think it's Pritchard, Amen, and DeAndre Hunter in that market until further notice. But no, I don't think they've got a most improved player candidate, even though it looked like they might at the time. Okay, weird market, but fun one to unpack. All right, we are done for today. Don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. For myself and Drew, we'll see you soon.